Good morning. Let's go ahead and open the session and call the meeting to order. At this time, I'd like to ask Councilman Hirschfeld to lead us in prayer.
Most gracious and heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the many blessings that you bestow upon us every single day. We sit here today and give you many, many thanks for all the rain that we recently received and the wonderful things that has done and will do for our community. And again, we ask you to continue to bless us and bring us more rain. And we look forward to the many blessings you bring upon us. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. This is going to be a group effort today, so I look forward to doing the pledges with the junior high group from Ambleside School of San Angelo, and they're accompanied today by one of their teachers, Rebecca Idala. And so y'all please join me and let's handle the prayers, or the pledges. We already handled the prayer. Today is a special meeting, and so the agenda for today is simply one item. This is the discussion on drought stages and water management measures under the Water Conservation and Drought Contingency Plan. We have a presentation today from our Water Utilities Director, Will Wilde. Good morning.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It certainly is a welcome change to come to you today and to bring you an update on what things are looking like after the very wonderful rains last week. And what we'll do this morning is first go through kind of an update on our water supply status to show you what effects the rains and the runoff had in our different water supply facilities. And going through these, we're going to start with our local lakes. First of all, Lake Nasworthy. You're going to see several photos here, aerial shots of the water supply areas taken by Brian Groves out of our Public Information Office. So we're very appreciative of Brian of getting these shots for us here. Lake Nasworthy has one principal stream that flows into it, Pecan Creek. Unfortunately, during this rain event, Pecan Creek did not see any kind of inflow to it. So what Nasworthy experienced was just the rain from the localized area there, 6+ inches falling directly on the reservoir, as well as that runoff from right adjacent to it did contribute to it. Some of the before and after shots, some of the areas around Lake Nasworthy, as you can see, with the reduction in the reservoir this past summer had dried up and now are seeing water covering those areas again. Some of the boat facilities, the boat houses around the lakes, the docks like that, you can see quite a dramatic change on those. The lake itself picked up a little over 1,300 acre-feet of water. What does that mean? That was about a 13-inch rise in the elevation of the reservoir itself. At this point in time, that certainly has improved from where we're at, but it still remains about a little over a foot below the normal operating level that we tend to hold Nasworthy at. It would take about 1,200 acre-feet of water to bring it up to that level. The next reservoir, Local 1 Twin Buttes Reservoir, which is split into two different pools within the reservoir itself. The north pool on the reservoir has two major streams that feed into the main body of the lake here. First, the one out into the distance that you can see right here is the Spring Creek, Dove Creek connection. Actually, Dove Creek ties into Spring Creek before it hits the main pool of the reservoir here. Both of those streams saw very good runoff coming into the reservoir during the rain event. The other stream you see here is the leg of the Middle Concho, which goes up toward the Arden Road area. The Middle Concho saw very little flow in it, and I don't know if any of that water actually reached the reservoir. But in spite of that, the middle pool did see some very good water come into it. The pool picked up a little over 6,000 acre feet into the north pool of the reservoir, about a 7.4 foot rise in the vertical increase in the elevation on the reservoir there. The other part of Twin Buttes Reservoir, the south pool, also saw some increase in its content, and on this one too you can see coming in the mid part of the photograph is the South Concho River, and you can barely see in the very end background here is the South Concho as heads toward Christoval. The South Concho did run some, not near as much as Dove Creek and Spring Creek, but it did contribute to a little over 1,400 acre feet of water into the south pool of the reservoir here. And on this particular part of the reservoir here where you do see the water, this is what's normally called the borrow pit for Twin Buttes Reservoir. When they were constructing the dam, the soil they needed to build the embankment for the dam, a large portion of it was taken out of this area right here. And in essence, that's why it's called the borrow pit, where the soil was taken to build the dam. So a lot of the water that comes into here is then stored within this particular part of the reservoir here. With that increase of about 1,400 acre feet, it saw a 5-foot vertical rise on the south pool of Twin Buttes. And looking back then, how does this compare between the total increase of a little over 8,000 acre feet in the Twin Buttes? This would put us back to about the same point in time we were in September of 2011. The other reservoir, Local 1, O.C. Fisher Reservoir, a shot of it after the rains on September 30th show that we do have some water up in O.C. Fisher again. The before and after photographs of O.C. Fisher that Brian was able to get for us, the one on the left side shows before the rain events a completely dry reservoir basin here. The only place you'll see any little blue is right at the entrance to the gate structure. So in essence, the reservoir was completely dry. The afterwards, certainly a good increase right there. Picked up a little over 2,000 acre feet of water, and the water now at the gate structure is a little over 6 feet deep at the entrance to the gate on there. And similarly, when was the last time this reservoir was at this level? It was back in January of 2011.
Will, you don't have a before shot on the Twin Buttes, do you?
No, I don't. The other reservoirs that are part of our overall water supply system, E.V. Spence Reservoir up at Robert Lee. As you can see, you saw a very dramatic change in its content. It was down to less than 1,000 acre feet. No water was really usable out of that anymore. Jumped up to over 28,000 acre feet. So a net of over 27,500 acre feet increase in the water supply in E.V. Spence Reservoir. Most of this water that came into Spence came off of what's called Beals Creek. And Beals Creek is kind of like the Concho River is to the Colorado going into Ivy. Beals Creek feeds into the Colorado River just above E.V. Spence Reservoir. And Beals Creek drains all of the area going from Spence toward Big Spring. So a very, very large drainage basin area that brought that water into E.V. Spence Reservoir. And the other thing that has been found at this point in time is some of the preliminary water quality samples on Spence indicate that the water quality should be considerably improved. The chloride levels, which had been very high, were in the 250 to 300 part per million range, so it was a very considerable improvement in water quality coming into that reservoir. Our primary water supply source, O.H. Ivy Reservoir, was the big winner on the runoff this time from a content of almost 65,000 acre feet up to over 142, right at 143,000 acre feet in the reservoir this morning. So it picked up almost 77 to 78,000 acre feet. In essence, a 15-foot vertical rise in the overall reservoir itself. So it more than doubled in size and content and came up 15 feet, certainly improving the condition of that reservoir. The last time Ivy was at this particular level looking back in time, was June of 2011, so a little over a year ago. This is where Ivy would have been at that point in time. To summarize, just to show you then, it's certainly welcome to look at these numbers as we look at the contents of the reservoirs, showing some very positive numbers here. And certainly this is a lot better than what we saw in the past on the change in those contents before. These had always been negative numbers. So it's very, very satisfying to be able to show you something on the good side here. A net overall increase over 116,700 acre feet increase of water into the 5 local reservoirs that we have water rights associated with. So with that, where does it bring us to as far as our water supply status? In looking at what do we have on our water supply status, we do 2 things in looking at that. First of all, we'll look at what is the city's needs, how does that compare to this supply that's available. In determining the city needs, we'll take what is the typical usage throughout the various months of a year. We'll look at that over a 2-year period, and then we'll apply against that, where is that supply going to come from? Our first source that we would use is the water coming from O.H. Ivy Reservoir, which is, again, our principal supply. We'll take off of that need what is available from Ivy Reservoir, and then meet the rest of that need from either Twin Buttes, O.C. Fisher, or Lake Nasworthy. Even though Spence is part of our water supply system, the facilities to deliver that water here are not operational at this time, so even though we could have the potential for some of that, we cannot use that in our calculations until that would be a viable source at this point in time. So looking at those other sources that are available right here, taking into consideration what they can supply to us, then we come down to what is our water supply status. Applying those criteria, the supply that we have available to us at this point in time is adequate to meet the projected needs of the city over the next 22 months. So certainly an increase of where we were less than 12 months just a week ago. Now we're up to 22 months, almost a 2-year supply available from those developed water supply sources. And then applying that into our water management plan within the Water Conservation Drought Contingency Plan. The trigger point for drought level 1 is when we're less than a 24-month water supply, but greater than an 18-month water supply. So we fall into the category where we would meet the trigger point for drought level 1. And as we say, the criteria for that are met. And to then briefly kind of what does it mean if we're in the drought level 1, since we've been into drought level 1s, 2, and 3, currently in 3. In looking at the current time period through the summer, the growing season, April through October, drought level 1 versus drought level 2, you can see the comparison. In the 1, the watering of lawns is allowed twice a week, twice every 7 days during the growing season versus once a week under drought level 2. Golf courses are all similar throughout that time period. The new landscape allowance is applicable under drought level 1, where under drought level 2 it would not be allowed. You could only water the new landscape once every 7 days as the other watering be allowed. The dormant season through the winter months, which we're fixing to be there in November through March, the levels between drought level 1 and drought level 2 are very similar. Once every 14 days, once every 2 weeks for watering of lawns of any kind of landscape outside. So very little difference through the winter time is watering of landscape materials. Probably the biggest difference comes into play as we go into the surcharge tables. Under drought level 1, the surcharges begin at 25,000 gallons, where at drought level 2 they begin at 10,000 gallons, and the rates go, instead of at $2,000 on the initially, or at $3 and $2, they're at $3.50. So not to belabor all those, but you can see there is the differences that would apply as far as the surcharges. Very similar under the commercial areas. Under the drought level 2, the surcharges would become effective at 60,000 under 2. Under drought level 1, they become effective at 75,000 gallons there. So to bring it down to our final recommendation then, based upon the criteria and the water supply available, we would recommend implementation and adoption of the resolution that we have for you to implement drought level 1. The effective date for that resolution, or the implementation of it, would be next week, Monday, October the 8th. And then the change of the surcharges with drought level 1 will become effective with the November billing. Okay, thank you.
Questions for the presentation or a motion?
I have
Go.
one going back. Will, on the O.H. Ivy, I know we share that, I believe, with Midland, Odessa. How much of that 142,000 can we use is ours?
As far as the projection on that, we base it upon our allowable pumping at this point in time, which is about 12.2 million gallons per day, about almost 14,000 acre feet per year. Our annual allotment without any kind of restriction is 15,000 acre feet a year, but at this point in time, the district, the Colorado River Municipal Water District, has not revised any of those pumping limitations, so we still have to plan our water usage based upon our current allowances.
I would like to see, I understand that we received quite an amount of rain. I understand that our levels are up, our water tables are up, and that we have enough water to move from drought level 3 into another stage. However, I would like to see us stay in drought level 3 because just because we have the water does not mean that we need to use the water. I would like to remind everyone that although we receive sufficient rainfall to bring up some of the water tables, that we are still in a drought. And we put a lot of things on Hickory. We have some things in place as it relates to water usage and car washes and et cetera, and I would like to see those things stay the way they are because I just see this as a license for people to go back and start abusing the natural resource that we have, the rain, which we waited so long to receive.
Okay, sir. Mr. Hirschfeld, then Ms. Farmer.
I'm kind of similar to you. However, I believe that we need to get off of drought level 3. I believe that we should be jumping back to drought level 2, not to drought level 1, because the watering restrictions is not that significantly different between the two, but it will still encourage conservation because you're right, we're not out of this drought. This is not a get out of jail free card. This was simply buying us some time, allowing us a breather to catch our breath and kind of regroup. So I would support moving to drought level 2, and because really when you look at it, when we get through the winter time, we'll have to head to drought level 2 in the spring anyway. I mean, if we're at 22 months now, you take off the months, we'll be going there anyway, and come March or so. So that would be my recommendation, is to drought level 2.
Okay, Ms. Farmer.
I have a statement and then I have a question for Will. My statement is based on the number of phone calls and text messages that I have received, basically begging us not to roll back to 2, to leave it at 3, that this is one rain event, 6 inches of which we're very, very thankful to the Lord for. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's continue to conserve and leave this alone until spring, whenever we could then move to 2 and possibly 1, depending on the rest of our rains. And I happen to agree with them. I conservatively feel that we need to be very cautious with this gift. And we don't need to be confusing the issue and the people out there by rolling back, rolling forward, and going back and forth till they stay confused. So the consensus that I have been receiving would prefer us to stay at 3 for the time being. My question to you, Will, is I'm not questioning you or doubting you in your ability. Please understand that. But I need to have a better comfort level to be able to ensure to my constituents on how our availability is based, how you figure it. I can pretty much tell them, well, a lake area covers so many acres, and then so many acres that are covered equals so much depth, and we add that and subtract for evaporation, and basically that's about all I know as to how you actually figure the volumes of water that we have out there. Could you give the folks out there that are viewing for television purposes or in the audience a little bit better understanding of my understanding as to how we actually measure the availability of the water?
Right. As far as that, as we've noted, we take what is the city's requirement, what are we going to need over a time period, and we typically base that upon the 2-year time frame we look at in the future here. And then we start subtracting off of that where we're going to get that supply from. As OH Ivy has been our primary supply, our most dependable supply, we utilize it as meeting the first part of that need. Once we subtract that from it, what is the remaining, then we apply what is available from our local sources. To determine what's available from our local sources is when we start taking into consideration the evaporation losses on those reservoirs. Historically, around 60 inches of evaporation had been utilized on this. The last 2 years, we've seen a considerable increase over that, so we're tending to increase the evaporation losses in our projections over the time period. So we're subtracting that off what is available and then applying the remainder of that to meet
And that
the supply.
evaporation number fluctuates because of the temperatures. We're
Exactly.
going into the dormant months, so the temperatures are less, so our evaporation is less.
Is less from now through
Okay.
March.
Okay.
Okay.
Other-
I-
Mr.
I have a lot-
Alexander?
I have a lot to say. First, there are jobs on the line here. There are landscape companies out there that want to plant a plant. And in drought level 3, if they plant the plant, they can't water it. And so if they can't water it, they can't service that customer. They just release that person that had a job, had one, because the city of San Angelo is in drought level 3 and scared to come out of it when there's really not an emergency. I see the drought as a blessing, and maybe I don't see it like everybody else, but I see it as, we've been praying for rain and praying for rain. Maybe we should have been praying for strength to get through these droughts, because we need a bigger, heftier water system, something more dependable for San Angelo, and we have to do more. We can't just sit where we are. This is not the same drought level 1 as it was before, because last time we were in this drought at level 1, we didn't have the Hickory Aquifer. And then we were looking at it saying, okay, maybe it'll get here, and then we won't be able to treat the radium in it, and we don't have enough capacity for 4 or 5 months to, we had 71% the capacity we needed to just run the water inside our homes. That was the situation coming up next September through Christmas. The new well fields would not be completed by then. So all these gaps have closed. We can now, at the end of this drought level, when we run out of water, if it doesn't rain again, we have a full functioning, highly likely full functioning Hickory Aquifer on board that has enough capacity to service all our indoor needs and probably a little bit of outdoor needs as well. So it's not the same as it was before. Something else I want to say is I ran a poll on Facebook.com/San Angelo, Texas, and there were 92 or so respondents. 63% of those respondents want us to artificially hold back the drought level. Of those, 54% want stage 3, 9% want stage 2, and nobody just arbitrarily said stage 1. The rest said, the 34% that are left, they said stick to the ordinance. That ordinance worked very well. Psychologically, we are all on the edge of our seats thinking water is very precious, let's conserve it. So by going through the stages methodically, we prepared our public methodically to how to think about these drought levels and think about what we have left in our lakes. So we had drought level 1, 2, and 3. 3 times went to the public and said, we're changing the drought level, it's getting more serious. Most don't follow every detail, but they know the drought level. And so when we start to inch in on this drought level towards 3 again, psychologically, people gear up for it and become more responsive. If we don't have these steps, it's proven to work. So if we don't have these steps, will it work? Are we hurting ourselves? We have a system that is flawless. I don't see a problem in the drought level system yet. Over many, many years, it has worked very well. So I understand that we're looking at a lake, O.C. Fisher, that will dry up again this next summer. We have a dead North Concho. The Twin Buttes looks pretty low. I see all that, but we have bigger things over the horizon. Drought levels are reactive. Let's be proactive. Let's look at what we can do. We can find new sources of water to diversify our portfolio. We can initiate policies at the city level that minimize losses in our water systems. There's lots of places to do it. We can move lakes move the South Pole to the North Pole. We already started that in August, so we know we can do that. We can use our affluent water. There's things we can do to be more proactive. Lastly, we have to practice conservation in a way that yields savings most effectively. We can try to save water right now, but it may not be effective. So what is most effective? So let's be proactive. This drought has spurred on Midland and Abilene to work with San Angelo. Last time we were here, it was kind of sketchy. it was difficult to get Midland to work with us. Now they're full blast working with us. They're sincere about this partnership. They're sincere about finding new water sources. And let me just say that that's about all we can say about that relationship, that we are allowed to discuss in executive session plans because we're acquiring land, water rights, and when we're doing that, we are allowed in executive session to discuss these things. In fact, we're not allowed to come out here and tell you anything about what we said in executive session. It's confidential information. All I can say is we have Midland, a huge economic powerhouse behind us, in Abilene, bigger economic powerhouse than we are. We can really reach a lot further than we used to. And so these plans are evolving, moving forward. They weren't last time we were here. So that's a long-term water supply that we might be looking at. For the first time in our city's history, we started looking at our effluent water. That's the treated sewer water that we send out to the farms to the east of town. We can use part of that water for our parks, golf courses. We can maybe even send some of it downstream like they do in Dallas. Dallas sends their effluent water down the Trinity River and eventually goes to Houston. And other areas, they'll drink it. So Houston's drinking Dallas's effluent water in effect, but it cleans up. Rivers clean up the water. We could send that downstream instead of releasing Nasworthy water, we could send our effluent water. We could do this in a number of years. That's more information I can't reveal, but we can do that. And so this, when you look at 2 years of water plus 5 years of water in the Hickory, that's 7 years before we get in real trouble. Last time we had this radium problem. This time is not the same thing.
Hang on. I need to back you up and let you do your math, okay? You know, when you say you have 2 years of water plus 5 years in the Hickory, I need you to explain
Quantify it.
that because you have a lot more than 5 years worth of water in the Hickory.
The Hickory Aquifer has about 1 million acre feet of water. San Angelo needs about 10,000 acre feet just to cruise along indoors, maybe 9,000 indoors. Okay, we get the bank currently 2,750 acre feet a year. We bank it like a piggy bank. Well, our piggy bank next year will have 37,000 acre feet in it. We need 9,000 for indoors. That's 4 years of water. But over those 4 years, we'll bank another year at least. So really have about 5 years of water in the Hickory 2 years from now. So we have 7 years of water without getting ourselves in a lot of trouble in San Angelo, Texas.
Okay.
All right. Moving on. When we had naturally occurring streams, and we went and dammed up these streams and made lakes and rivers, we've learned how to move our water from the South Pole to the North Pole. We did it a long time ago in the 80s, but we also did it this August 1st. Stephen Brown, let's take this notion that it saves water to move the water from the South Pole to the North Pole. I think it saves 3,200 acre feet a year. Okay, these are preliminary figures based on what we lose in the EQ channel. Farmers taking water around the South Pole, they're probably connected in somehow. I think that we should look at, or Stephen, your board, the Water Advisory Board, should look at that on April 1st. If we are in drought level of any kind on April 1st, we move that water automatically. And if we enter a drought level before July 1st, so if we enter drought level 1 June 30th, then we'd start initiating moving that water at that point in time. I think it needs to be a part of our water conservation ordinance so we don't bring it to the council every time. It needs to be well thought out and implemented such that we save that water. And over a 2-year period, that's around 6,000 acre feet, but there's some evaporation, some losses. It is still a lot of water. And we need to do that. That's proactive thinking. So here we are. We're going to maybe think about going to drought level 3 when we should have moved our water in the South Pole to the North Pole in April, and we would have saved an enormous amount of water. There's not a need to go to drought level 3 when you can save water. We can save water, the city of San Angelo, that much water. I also think that, and let me say one more thing. Had we moved that water, Lake Nasworthy would not have had to drop. The drop in Lake Nasworthy is because there was not enough water in the North Pole. And so when we move that water, we also stabilize Lake Nasworthy, which stabilizes our economy. So also we can look at between the Nasworthy Dam and the water treatment plant, there are 3 lakes. There's Metcalf, Benficklin, and Lone Wolf lakes. Those things used to be virgin streams, little bitty thin things that didn't lose a lot of water, and then we swell them up like big rivers, and they lose 1.1 cubic feet a second to evaporation and 5.9 cubic feet a second underground in the summer. We don't have a reading in the winter to know what we lose underground in the winter. There's a couple of thousand acre feet there that's being lost every year. I think we should seek permits to install pipes so we can release that water and streamline that when we get to drought level 2 or 3. On the horizon, there's thinking and plans being made to capture stormwater. People say that as an obvious thing we should always be doing on the Facebook page. We are planning, we are thinking about that, just how to go about that. And then the numbers are not small; they're large captures. If we can do that, that was not in the pipe. In the pipe, I shouldn't say that, but it was not in the works last time we were in drought level 1. That can be done. It seems like to me it can be done fairly quick, certainly in under 7 years. And lastly, the water per capita usage in San Angelo has dropped since 1998. We used to use 23,300 acre feet of water per year. That's 1998. That's our peak. We have it down to around 14 to 16,000 acre feet a year. So say 15,000 acre feet a year, and we've grown as a city in size since then. So, and Will showed it before. He could show us right here again if you had the slide. We use less water per capita fairly consistently every year. That's because we're becoming more water conscious. We put in low flow toilets, shower heads that are low flow. This takes place over time and it gets better and better. We're doing better and better. We are conservation minded, and I don't think we need level 3 to remind us of that. So does the stair-step drought level plan work like it should? I talked about the psychology. It's flawless. It's worked every single time. I wouldn't touch it. But the other thing is when you have lakes with 22 months of water in them, they have a lot of surface area. And you would be amazed at how much of that water evaporates every year. Just the average is 62 inches. In 2011, it was double that, about 120 inches. With all that surface area, if we save a gallon of water now, next year and then next year, about 2 years from now, we don't get a gallon of water later. You don't bank it like you do the hickory when it's underground. It evaporates. So you get maybe a half gallon savings. So you save a gallon now, you get a half gallon later. It's not a 1-for-1 ratio, but when the water levels go down and the surface area decreases, it's a better ratio. It's more like, let's just say your gallon saved gets you 0.8 gallons later. It's a better ratio. And so what that says is, as we have less and less water, create more and more stringent restrictions. That system, when they match up like that, that's a good, effective system for saving water. And so, can you tell that I live and breathe water as a servant for this city, that I study, I know, and I think about these things all the time? It doesn't take a rainstorm or a drought to get me to do this. I've been doing this for 2 years. I'm very confident in the supply of water in San Angelo, Texas. We do not need level 3 and put people out of jobs. Level 2 is acceptable. Level 1 is where we should be, because if we're at level 1, then in 4 months we can initiate level 2 again before the summer ever gets here.
If it doesn't rain.
If it doesn't rain. And psychologically, that triggers everybody to start conserving water even more. If we don't have that trigger, I mean, what's the difference between level 1 and level 2 all winter long? Not much. I think we want the trigger up the road that says we have 18 months of water left. Let's conserve more. It's flawless. You know what I want. Level 1, that's where we should be. It's flawless. It's always worked.
Thank you. Mr. Silvas?
It's a long discourse. I appreciate it. I have a lot to say about it and lots of reasons why.
Mr. Silvas?
Well, I've got a question and then a couple of comments, and I'll keep it real short. But my question is, I know that according to the levels we have now, by ordinance or by law, we have to move into level 1. Is that right? Level 2? What? We don't have to?
Where does it say?
Where does it say
let's-
that?
If I might, but I could wait,
Oh,
I would
okay.
direct us.
And I'm asking, I'm not
to
saying
the
it's saying.
scheme that's set up in our ordinance, and we're required to adhere to
Mhm.
that. Council's action at this point, after being advised that we are in the drought stage that the director has indicated, we are, it's just ministerial that you shall implement that drought stage. And so let's look at Section 11203B. drought trigger point, which states whenever the total amount of water available to the city falls below the minimum criteria established for each water supply stage level, the city shall be deemed to have entered in a drought stage for management of its water supply. So my suggestion is that it's a fact that he has told us that the supply, the criteria, he's done the calculations. It is a fact that we are in a different drought. We're not in level 3.
Okay.
And so then if you proceed to look at the next paragraph, which states the water utilities director shall notify city manager and council upon entering the threshold of the drought stage, and then council shall implement. So I think under the present ordinance, your duties are ministerial. You don't have the discretion to arbitrarily remain in a different drought stage.
Okay.
And so I think that I would also point out to you that you have authorized, by enacting this scheme and structure for managing and conserving water, you have designated the Director of Water Utilities to administer this, and state law requires us to have an authority to direct and implement the plan, which is what Will is doing. And so I think to deviate and from the mandate of your ministerial duties to move and act in accordance with the plan, the ordinance would have to be amended, and it would have to allow that discretion. I think there might be a question about exceptions based on 2 council meetings ago that you have authority to accept provisions of the article. This was not the intent. It was not intended with those exceptions, and I think Will can address that additionally, but it was intended that groups could come, and since they couldn't go through the variance process, they could ask for exception to some of the limitations and restrictions. But it's very important that we adhere to the scheme that's set out by ordinance, and we just don't have the ability for council to arbitrarily dig their heels in, so to speak, and remain in a drought stage that factually we're deemed not to be in level 3 anymore. So that's
I
what
do
my
have a question
recommendation is.
I've got some comments now, and going through that, over the last couple of a week and a half, I've heard more and more from people out there that I think water and conservation are the 2 words that people are talking about. So I'm glad that people are finally starting to say, hey, we are in dire straits. Even this 22-month supply, I mean, it is a shot in the arm, but still, people are starting to understand, man, it is smart for us to conservate, but call it what you want to call it, whether it's drought level 3, 2, or 1. I'm leaning towards either 1 or 2. There's not that much difference, but I think if we can move into either one of those, but keep some stringent restrictions as far as usage, I think we'll all be happy. Because again, time and time again over the last week, people have told me, hey, keep it where we're at. Keep it where we're at. And I think if we can keep it where we're at or move it 1 or 2, but still kind of, put restrictions where we can. Whether it's, I like that drought level 2, watering your lawns or shrubs maybe once every 2 weeks. If we can pick and choose some restrictions, I mean, I guess that'd be good if we can. But again, people are saying keep it at 3, and I don't think we need to keep it at 3. We need to give it a little flexibility, but maybe not move all the way down to 1. That's what I'm hearing out there. So.
Well, I understand. I read this exactly the way the city attorney reads it. I don't think you have the authority to do anything except go to drought level 1. I think that's what this says. I don't think it keeps you from, hang on, one at a time here. All right? I think that for lots of reasons we should go to drought level 1. I think that it is a terrible mistake to stay in drought level 3, because what you're then saying is you don't care what the ordinance says. You're smarter than the ordinance. You're more capable than the ordinance. You're more capable than this council as a whole. You're more capable than recent and historical councils, and that you've made a decision that's not based on what we said we would go by. I think that causes a real loss of confidence in what we do here, that you have to be data driven to give yourself an opportunity to tell people, here's what the data says, here's what we did. And you do things on a very consistent basis that way. I think consistency and people understanding what they can expect from you is very important. And so from my perspective, it's very important that we do what the data tells us to do. Now, that said, I also think you can make the case that Mr. Wilde is being quite conservative with the data. And so I applaud that. I think that's fine. But Mr. Wilde, there are 3,000 acre feet we have a right to in Ivy Reservoir, and there are 28,000 acre feet over there now. So the idea... in Spence Reservoir. So the idea that we could trade with Midland, where it would be cheaper for them to take the water from Spence to Midland than from Ivy to Midland, and use that 3,000 acre feet out of Ivy, is not in your
Calculation. Right.
well, his calculations are right. That'd be fine in his projection. Is what the word I was looking for, but calculation. And so, my perspective is that we have water, and that people need to understand that when we have water, we do things a certain way. That water evaporates, and when you're totally looking at what's going on surface level water, what you're doing when you say we're not going to use it is you're making the decision to let it go away. And so there are some things here that just don't make sense to me. I'd like to make sure we go by the ordinance. I think the ordinance requires us to go by it, and that we should be having this debate about whether we want to change the ordinance through a first reading, a debate, and then a second reading, and all the kinds of things that we do when we change an ordinance. And so I don't think today is the day we're supposed to be doing that. I think today is administerial in its approach, and all we're supposed to be doing is listening to the administrator tell us, here's what the facts say, and then say, okay, according to the facts, let's put that in place and move on. And then another day, for those of you that think we should be being more restrictive, you should be bringing the ordinance back up and saying, I want to talk about the ordinance itself. And we should have that debate then. But for today, I think the ordinance says, do what he told us, number one. Number two, I think he's being quite conservative. I think there's more water out there than he's able to say we could use, and that we can make some adjustments there and actually have more water. And number three, it evaporates when you don't use it. And number four, when you're not consistent with the public, then they don't know what to expect from you. And we need to be consistent. The ordinance tells us what to do. Let's do what it says. And if you want to change the ordinance, then change the ordinance, and then send that out to folks so that they get to study it, understand it, and go by it as it moves along. So those are the things that are on my mind. I'd like to recognize Mr. Hirschfeld.
You know what? I guess at first, when I reread the ordinance, and then I read through the resolution we passed last week. When the available water, this is item number 4 on the resolution, when the available water supply rises above the trigger point for drought level 3 stage, the Director of Water Utilities may recommend to the City Council termination of the drought level 3 stage.
Mr. Hirschfeld,
This is the resolution from last year.
Out of consideration, let's all find it and let me take a look at it with you.
Sure.
Okay, where are you?
This is the resolution that we passed last week, moving us to drought level 3. I brought my own copy, so I don't know if y'all have a copy or not.
Okay. What? You want to put it on the screen?
I have it on mine. I'll just need to disconnect it from here.
need some assistance from Brian. IT.
Alvin, I suggested moving water on April 1st, and I forgot to put a cutoff date. I think that on October 1st, we should never be moving water October 1st through April 1st. It doesn't make sense. The evaporation's too low. So I would throw that in as well for the Water Advisory Board to throw that in on October 1st, cease the pumping. It just doesn't make sense. And we're looking at that today as well, and that's my opinion, while we have that time.
Consistent with the ordinance, though, November's kind of the trigger point. So again,
well-
you want to think through all that. I mean, I'm saying when it says look at November through we're going to do watering a certain way.
It's
and
only Will
so-
and his crew that looks at it. It really is. At this point in time, it's too late. It takes 3 months to pump that water over. I'd rather see also us install permanent pipes that take it from south all the way to north. And I was thinking about it, we could bury those things 13 feet deep and extend them into the south pool, and it could be sealed. I mean, you're only looking at a 2-foot wide trench for 3 pipes stacked on top of each other. They can go all the way into that south pool, and they'd flow on their own without pumps.
Some of those things are things we have talked about before in one-on-one
but
sessions.
seal it. We didn't talk about
There's
sealing it.
also the thing that needs to move forward there, and that we should again talk about on another day when we're not administering this, is what we would like the city staff to do, and what we would like to do with the Bureau of Reclamation. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, that's our next step. And
Yeah.
I've talked recently with Representative Darby about that and others, because we're going to need a coalition of people to
Okay.
try to move
Item
that
number
process
4.
forward. Okay.
Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now we can follow you.
Back to my question on when you're reading through this thing, it says, the Director of Water Utilities may recommend to the City Council termination of drought level 3 stage status and return to drought level 2 stage status or other recommendation. And I guess
But he did, and he said drought level 1. That we have 22 months worth of water.
And the trigger for drought level 2 is right around the corner. We want to go through that trigger, and there's
Well,
no,
and we don't want to go through
we
the
don't
trigger.
want to,
What we
but-
want is to get enough rain that we don't have to.
we don't want to
And-
skip the trigger.
Okay, and we don't
have
want to skip the trigger. That I agree with.
Mr. Mayor, I'll concur with with how we're reading this. I had maybe looked and interpreted some of the readings on this a little bit different, and I will concur. I'll
Mr.
agree with our city attorney. Thank
you,
very
Mr. Hirschfeld. Okay, I'm going to make the motion that we follow the administrative advice of the Director of Water Utilities, Mr. Wilde, and at this point enact drought level 1, which is what I think the ordinance requires us to do.
And I'll second that.
With all respect to the mayor, I just have to say this. You made the comment that if we don't do this, we're acting, we're taking a position that we're smarter than the
Oh,
ordinance.
that's true.
But
Go
I
ahead.
believe we've already taken that position at our last council meeting when we made the exceptions for the car washing and for the swimming pools and et cetera.
Right.
And I know I have the ordinance in front of me. Mr. Alexander brought up some very good points, but I think that we need to understand that, you know, we know Hickory's coming, we anticipate its arrival, but Hickory is not here yet. It's not here yet. And even Mr. Alexander said it's highly likable we won't get any more rain. So I appreciate the ordinance. I just had to say that.
Mr. Adams, let me apologize for any offense that I caused.
No,
because
no,
the fact
no,
that-
no, we're
No,
good.
but seriously, because the truth is, sometimes when you're in the act of standing up for what you think, you say some things that if you were a little more thoughtful, you'd be more eloquent. So I don't think that I would want you to be characterized as thinking you're smarter than previous councils. I wish I had not said something like that, okay? That said, there is a motion and a second on the floor, okay? I'm looking for further discussion or for,
I've got a couple.
okay, go ahead, Mr.
Will
Sills.
or Rick or somebody, so if we go to 1, does that mean we're going to open up the gates as far as the parks being watered, and we're going to go back to square one? We're just going to
Yes.
open everything up again.
And we need to go back and address the ordinance. That's the proper steps, and they're exactly right. That is the proper step that we need to do.
Or we could table this and then address it, or could we not? Could we not
It'll still
address
take
the-
2 readings to change.
It's not going to do anything for you.
Okay. I understand what I heard out there. People say, please, just take care of our water, make the right choice that, so we can all conserve. So as long as the people understand that, hey, if we go to one, if we vote to take it to one, we're still going to be looking at conservation. We're not just opening the gates again for those folks
I
to
do argue, though-
abuse.
Okay, I do argue that that is a drought stage level. It's not. It does encourage conservation, and I remind you, Mr. Silvas, that people have to buy water for us to be able to afford to buy chlorine to treat their water.
Sure.
And they have to buy water for us to be able to provide new pipes and
That's exactly right.
infrastructure for them. And so when we can sell water, we need to sell water. That's part of allowing us to have the economic means to withstand terrible droughts. And so,
And I'm not saying not going to one. I'm just saying that people, at least, so people understand that, hey, we are looking at the best interest of the city as a whole. We're not just going to,
Yes, sir.
leave it wide open all over again and get back to the levels being as low as they were last time. So
Yes, sir. Okay, well, there's a motion and a second. Further questions or comments? Ms. Farmer?
Just a comment that, I fear having a really good explanation to the people out there if we move to one, and I really don't want to say what I would like to do until I hear from our water board or from the folks out there in the audience. I really want to hear what their general perception and understanding it is of what we're doing here before I move forward.
I will open,
Okay.
I will certainly open it for public comment. And again, I just think the ordinance tells you what you're going to do under law. Okay, let's open up for public comment.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Stephen Brown. I'm Vice Chairman of your Water Advisory Board. I would like to point out a couple of issues that the mayor pointed toward. You probably are conservative in the amount of water that is available. I'll make 2 points. The Colorado River Municipal Water District likely will begin utilizing Spence water for delivery to Midland, Odessa, and Big Spring and Snyder. by the
Stephen,
use-
can you talk into the mic?
Because it is cheaper to pump from Spence than it is from Ivy for those sources. That will allow Ivy to sustain itself, probably, for us and others like Abilene. In addition, I will point out that the springs on South Concho, Spring Creek, and Dove Creek are likely in a recharge position. And from late November through the early April, you're likely to see a net gain in Twin Buttes, and probably in the South Concho, with the weather pattern as it is we are seeing now, and we're seeing a potential for another rain event next weekend, not necessarily like the one we just had, but they're predicting a 3 to 4 day rain event potential at this point. And if the weather pattern is breaking, as the Weather Service has said, and we're going out of La Nina into El Nino, we are likely to have a wetter fall and wetter spring than we have known. If that is the case, there's no question in my mind, and I've watched it, and I have some experience over 47 years in this community, you will see Twin Buttes gain between now and April, particularly after the frost occurs. You also have the ability to utilize O.C. Fisher during this spring months because it already has been decimated ecologically because it dried up this summer. Now you've got 2,000 acre feet to use, and you can manage it, and Will knows how to manage it. Even though you've got a river project going on, you can lower the level and you can let it out as you need it and pick it up at Bell and use it. And that's 2,000 acre feet. If you don't use it, it's going to be lost next summer to evaporation. And that doesn't even assume that we may get another rain, because the North Concho ran all the way from Water Valley down, and it put about 2,000 acre feet into OC. Spring Creek ran, Dove Creek got on a 10-foot rise. The South Concho got on a rise. And that doesn't even count what may happen between now and July of next year if we get additional rains on the Ivy watershed. So I think the ordinance is clear, and I think the mayor is exactly correct in his statements to you about the capability of our water supply.
Public comment, please. Good morning.
Good morning, Council. And my name's Jerry C. I've been in around some conversations that were very interesting, and I walked away from those conversations and not saying a word, and that's unusual for me. Anybody that know me, I'm always going to say something. But some of the people are here today. I'm for keeping this this drought level 3, and the reasons for that is, there's always some good comes out of bad. The bad thing was we had a drought. You had to learn how to manage it, so we came up with this drought level 3. Okay, and the good thing out of that is we've learned to live with that. Okay, now the good thing that came with that, we have some rain. So that gave us a little bank account. Okay, now that we have it, you're ready to spend it already. But see, we have water on the way. We know that already. That's a good thing. And there's another good thing. Last week or so, one of the councilmen came in and showed you a very little mesquite bush tree that's going to be a tree with about a 10, maybe
37-inch root.
Sorry?
37-inch root.
3-foot root.
Yeah, over 3 foot. 3 foot 1 inch root.
Okay, now the tap root was how deep?
37 inches.
37 inches. You see, that's where your evaporation is going. If you continue, at one time there was a mesquite eradication. Now before that water gets here, clean up our rivers and our banks, eradicate that mesquite tree. That would stop a lot of our evaporation. Keep our drought level 3. Okay, when the water comes here, keep it even then. Fill up all of our reservoirs, fill up all of our rivers. Now we know we might not get any more rain, but we know there's going to be another drought. But if we have all of our water facilities filled, we can even maybe let some water into other drainage ditches for our farmers, and let more water into the rivers downstream. You know, don't waste an opportunity to fill up our bank accounts with water.
Thank you.
We know that we have water coming. Kill the mesquite, lessen the chance of evaporation, and use what God has given us. So take advantage of what we have coming. Thank you very much. I
Okay,
appreciate
thank
your
you.
time.
Other public input?
How you doing? Thanks for
Good morning.
the opportunity to give my opinion. First of all, I work in a local store. I'm sorry.
Because we're recorded and you haven't spoken before, and it's fine. But go ahead and give us your name so we
Sure.
have that,
Oh,
and then,
sorry.
and then carry forward.
Sure. My name is Steve Reisdorfer, and I've lived in San Angelo for 22 years. I love the town. It's a great town. Really proud to live here. And just want to let you guys know that I work in a local store. We get people from all over, probably 15, 20 counties. There's a lot of drought. There's a lot of problems right now. I don't want to see San Angelo look like the thief of water. We just have to be careful. We're in drought stage 3. I understand we're mandated to go to 2 or to 1. I think it might set forth bad, or kind of set us up as, to hurt our reputation a little bit if we go right to 1, because there's people all over that didn't get any rain, and they're going to be looking at us like we're going to waste water. So if we could stay in 2, or go to 2. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you very much. Other public input?
I'm Jerry Warnell, Chicken Farm Arts Center. I just want to kind of clarify some of the things that I think I understood here today.
Okay.
One is that Councilman Alexander took a poll, and 62% want to stay in phase 3 or 2.
63%. 63.
63%, I'm sorry. And Ms. Farmer, you've heard from many people they want to stay. Mr. Adams, you've also heard. And I'm understanding that 62% here, many, well, nobody's taken numbers, but a majority want to stay in phase 3 or phase 2. I understand you're dealing with things that will come in the future. My understanding is the Hickory Aquifer has taken 10 years to get here. So if we start on something today, we're not talking about 5 years. We're probably talking about 10 years away of getting an additional source of water to San Angelo.
No.
Well, that's just taking history from the Hickory Aquifer.
No, the Hickory Aquifer, sir, was started in the 1970s.
Oh, so it's taken 30
And
years.
It's taken
1971.
forever, but we
44
never
years.
have actually taken bids and started the process. This is the first time ever that we have actually started laying the pipeline. So you're mixing facts, okay?
But it still took that long from initiation till, I mean,
approved
even though we
project.
had water during that period of
The
time.
people voted for
So-
it finally.
Right.
And so you're,
Okay.
again, that's,
And again, my understanding on the Hickory Aquifer is that it will bring at peak 9 million gallons a day. Is that
no.
what I've heard?
No, but that's where Mr. Alexander's trying to explain what we can do is around 10,000 acre feet a year in an emergency environment, basically for about 4 or 5 years.
But-
But what we have is banked water at the rate of around 4,000 acre feet per year. We have in 2024, we get to take 10,000 acre feet a year until the year 2036, at which point we get to take 12,000 acre feet a year. Okay? Between now and then, the Hickory Aquifer water will be able to be here in June or July of 2013. So less than 1 year. Then the treatment facility is being planned, put in place, all those things right now, and that treatment facility is to open in June of 2014. So by the time that this 22 months worth of water were not available, if we had no more rain from today, if we then went 22 months, we would have that facility able to pump the 9 or 9.5 million gallons a day, because we also approved putting 5 to 7, depending on what the money pays for, new wells in place down there. All of that will be in place by January of 2014. So what you're talking about is this is October of 12. By July of 14, you will have the ability to bring that water on. None of that was in what Mr. Wilde talked about, because he's not allowed to talk about that yet. He only is telling you that there's 22 months worth of water available from the existing reservoirs and the existing supply. So the Hickory Aquifer will be all new water. The way things are set up now, he could actually start using some of the Hickory Aquifer water with local water blended to pull the picocures of radium down. He's not using that in his projection. He's only using what is in the lakes. And so I'm saying to you, his projections are quite conservative at 22 months.
I understand that, and I understand that we're not probably, the council will go to drought level 1. I understand that from
Well,
the
and then we'll
legality.
probably end up in a negotiation process or debate process about whether we
But
should
my
change the
understanding
ordinance.
is that the pipeline, I mean, we can have all the water we have at the Hickory Aquifer, but in order to get it here, it has to go through a pipe. And that pipe will only bring 9 million gallons a day.
Okay, go ahead.
And the city, if I am correct, uses approximately 18 million?
No,
No, that's
if I might,
peak-
the
that's
9 million
peak summer.
The 9 million is usage, wintertime usage per day for the citizens in San Angelo.
Outside, inside,
Average.
total usage?
Total
Right,
usage
that's
in
total
winter
usage for the
months.
city per day.
Okay.
And the pipe can actually bring 14 million gallons. We can put 22 wells out there, use 20. We can expand. I'm just saying the pipe is big enough to bring more water than just the, what'd you say? It's 6,700 now. It'll be close to
Okay.
10,700
My
later.
understanding is it was peaked at 9 million.
No, that's, no,
go higher.
And
but,
that's why I'm asking for clarification.
They can go
but
higher.
your number of 18 million gallons a day is something that we hit sometimes in the summer, okay? But that's not with restrictions. That's not with us putting in place not being able to water outside,
That's
only
drought
being
level
able to.
1, correct?
Yeah, it's conservation level, which is, so you have conservation level, then drought level 1, which is an implementation of some penalties for overuse of water, if you want to look at it that way, financial penalties. Then drought level 2, then drought level 3. There are 4 levels in this process. We're going from the most draconian, the toughest, biggest restrictions, back to the second level, which is called drought level 1. I can see where that's a little
That could be
confusing, okay? But the first level is conservation level. We're not going to that, which is normal use, okay? We're not going to that. We're going from 3 past 2 to 1 based on what the ordinance requires us to do. But that still has restrictions on what you can do to make sure conservation is encouraged,
Okay.
okay?
Well,
I'd love to meet with you sometime, some other place, because the fact is, I don't think your facts are good.
okay, well, and
so I'd
what
love
I
to
gained, I thought I gained here at
I'd love
the council
to.
meeting.
Okay, well,
Um,
I'd love to sit down with you. I'm sure, and go through some of what we have. I'd love to do that with you. okay?
I'm very encouraged that the city has set up a rainwater harvesting workshop. That is one of the things that I think can greatly assist the city in its water.
Okay.
But I do think, and I encourage the council to please consider that by even going back to phase 1, I think the perception is going to be you're opening the gates again.
Okay.
That
Thank
may be
you.
true,
Thank you.
because we
I have
call
a
it 1 and
question.
not 2. But
Ms. Farmer.
I have a question and clarification. We're here today, 1 week after we went into stage 3, because our ordinance requires our water director to give us a report on availability. That's why we're here today. My question is there anything written, I'm asking our city attorney, that requires us to make this a decision today, or can we look at October 10th or 16th as possibly looking at this? I mean, why is there such a rush today? That's my question.
And then I'll just review, and the mayor's reaffirm that your actions are ministerial at this point. We are deemed to be in the drought stage of level 1, which is what was articulated carefully by Mr. Wilde. He has advised us such, and it is a fact. It's an immutable fact. We are deemed to be in that drought stage. We're not in level 3 anymore.
Okay.
And so then, based on that, based on his authority granted under the current ordinance, Mr. Wilde then advises you of such, and you implement. There's no discretion not to the appropriate stage that we are now in. And so, to answer you, this is just where we are now, and we've entered it, and council is required ministerially to act based on the scheme and structure
Okay,
of our current
and the way I'm
ordinance.
hearing that and the way I'm saying that is we, the council, have a duty to our citizens to make absolutely certain that we're not overcharging them for an item that we do not have to be overcharging for because we're legally out of the requirement of drought stage 3. So in other words, we shouldn't be gouging our citizens when it is not necessary. That's the reason the ordinance is written. And I can understand that in trying to protect the citizens. And I guess a recommendation from me would be is we're required by law to do this to protect you, your citizens, your tax dollars, and what you pay for, and not gouge you. But I would strongly urge each and every household and business to continue as if we were in drought stage 3, to practice conservation and prove that we can do it, even though it appears to me that I have to be in agreement with the mayor. It appears the way the ordinance is written and by law, we're going to be required to do this.
Okay.
Is that a fair assumption?
I believe that's correct. Do we have any further public input before I take this vote? Okay. Hi.
Hi. I'm Pam Bladine, also from the Chicken Farm Arts Center. I actually find this still fairly vague, although I can understand the way you read it. It seems fairly clear. I guess one question I would have would be, would you be deciding this had you decided not to have a meeting today? So had there been no meeting, there would have been no issue, or were you required to have a meeting, therefore make this change? It does bring to light certainly the aspects of the money challenges, because that is written into the various stages, so that means different levels of conservation plus more money to pay for overusage. Those of us around the chicken farm talked a lot about this in the beginning, when the answer seemed to be on the conservation level was to just raise the rates rather than to go into another stage or to have more restrictions. And our feeling was, gee, that's really hard for the people that have the money to pay the rates to have the big lawns. That seemed to be a sort of a lot of conversation, was the people who have big lawns can afford to pay more, and it doesn't really matter to them. That didn't help anything in any way. It didn't seem to us to help the people that were in the community dealing with the overall water problem, because those of us who elected to not keep our lawns and just let them go voluntarily, and those people that were having a hard time doing that anyway, they weren't going to have the lawns. So it was sort of a glaring issue of the lawns or not the lawns, and where the water goes. What I feel like I'm hearing among the different people, and it's been really instructive to begin to get more of this information, because we haven't really availed ourselves of this information. So what Mr. Alexander is giving us and what you're giving us is the beginning of a real education for us. But I hear a difference in concern in terms of the alertness and the alarmness of using our environment in a way that either helps us or doesn't help us. There's, on one side, it seems to be, let's get all the water we can and let's go after it, and then we'll have it for 7 years. Or the other side is, let's recognize that we live in a desert, and we don't live in a place where it supports green lawns. The Southern California area is a desert, and they raped the rest of the country for water, or at least the western part of the country, to water their lawns and grow their flowers. But it is a desert, and we are a desert. So unless we do what I'm hearing half of the people report themselves and that the constituents are saying, is let's recognize that we live in an environment that needs to be, by the very nature, looked at the way it is and supported the way it is, and not act like we live somewhere where we just get to have the water and then we run out. Because we will run out. I mean, we're fracking it, to beat the band now, so where does that come in? So that to me is a really important issue in terms of how the council views and leads and represents the people and our environment and so on. And it seems to me that if I really take to heart the fact that the people that lose their jobs, you guys addressed that in the last meeting in terms of the exceptions. And then there's the landscaping people. That kind of brings it up for me. Well, the landscaping people perhaps should be encouraged to help their clients landscape in a way that they use less water. It's disturbing to go around and see city areas where people have well water, and it's kind of in your face. I have well water, I have green lawn. I guess that water comes from some magical place that isn't part of the rest of the water system. So that's kind of, it's all part of the same system, you know. So anyway, I would really hope that the council, and Alvin, you said, yeah, I'd like to talk to you, Jerry, again. We'd like to all have you talk to us, and I'd love to see you write a big article, and I'd love to see this really explained to the people. I mean, you're going to make a point about money, that gets everybody's attention. But it's really important to know how all the water system works. We are starting to talk a lot about education and how it starts in the schools, and, you know, we could really become a city that points it at itself as here's the how-to way to deal with the environment that you live in and do the best we can for everybody, really understand the system. You know, I mean, come here, because if you want to come to Texas, you want to come here because we really know how to take care of our environment. So I guess as an overall theme, it makes a difference in terms of whether there's leadership that says we really want to see the highest and the most complete way in which to deal with, rather than, well, it just says we have to do that, so we should do that because that ordinance is.
Of course, that's not really what was said, though.
So it was said, but it was, but I understand that that's, you know, I really did appreciate when you then said, right now, and again, right now, I guess it's because you called the meeting, right now, it seems to be mandated in a certain way, but that doesn't mean that the council doesn't take up the ordinance, as you said.
There you
bring
go.
people to the discussion, bring people to the table.
There you go.
I mean, this certainly seems like time when.
And it wouldn't change on timing only would, I'll let you have time.
One other
but-
thing is that the other thing about people, I think why people are lobbying to stay in stage 3 is because I think people are peaked now. I think that we're peaked to think about this, and I think if it disappears in a sense. It's almost as though the council says, everything is okay, everybody go back to sleep, everybody use the water you want to. That's not what you're saying, and I think that needs to be made clear, because people don't know enough to really, you know, carry it on. So I think a greater explanation and a real heartfelt, you know, amount of information from you guys would be helpful.
But also recognize, today's October the 5th. Otherwise, whether we had this meeting today or we had it on October 16th, things wouldn't change. The ordinance would require a certain action, and then we would have to go, as you just described,
Right.
then we would have to go through a process.
Right. No, I understand.
Okay.
I
The
understand.
other thing I do want you to at least spend some energy on between now and when this discussion takes place is the evaporation of these.
No,
of these
I was greatly appreciated. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that really is helpful for people to know.
Because in some ways, if you don't use the water, you.
No, I'm not
no one
arguing
else gets
against
to
you
use it
going
either.
to stage 3 at this point. I'm just saying what I'm hearing is a sort of two different senses, and people, and I think the understanding and why you might do it, you have to do it one way because of the ordinance, you do it another way because of the particulars of how the water is used. But there's a larger picture that really says to everybody, people, here's where we live. Here really would be the master plan if we really want to get it right.
Okay.
And we do that at that level. I mean, that doesn't left to these person or these people. I mean,
Yeah.
you guys are the ones that are sort of the representatives, and
Kind of.
and you guys have something to say about that. So don't just say
Very
this
good.
is what we have to do for the ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, my name is Bill Richardson. I like to say that we don't live in the desert, we live in a semi-arid area, and that the well water is taken from aquifers, separate from the aquifer that we use for the city. And I agree with the feeling that we should conserve our water, and people see water running down the street and they wonder why it can't be collected. And I'd like to say that I live in Mr. Alexander's district, and I knew of no poll taken there, so I think that should be ignored. Thank you.
Okay, well, okay, very good. Thank you. Other public input before I call for the vote?
I have a quick
Online
question.
poll, online.
Yeah.
What is the average evaporation for November and December, Mr. Wilde?
I can answer that question. I have the
Okay.
documents. It just takes me a little bit of time.
If you
to
can
get
answer it, Mr. Alexander, I just as long as I have a fairly accurate answer, I'd be happy.
3 minutes,
No.
and I'm on it. Actually, when we get on it fast.
Cut up, I have another question for Will or whoever knows it. The recent rains, the 6-inch rains that we got all over town, how long will that moisture stay with us? I mean, how long will the ground be as saturated as it is? I mean, is there a number of days, or is it just the heat index, or what?
Depends on.
I think all those factors would come into play, but our Parks Department, Parks Director, Roger Havilah, has looked at what would they consider on their facilities, and his comment was that at least for the next 2 weeks, there's absolutely no need for any type of lawn watering, tree water, or anything. There's plenty of moisture has been absorbed into the ground to sustain at least for the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay, you have an answer. Evaporation is 5.29 inches. That was the worst case scenario, by the way. I need to look for average. That's November of 2011. In 2011, we lost double our evaporation of normal. So I'm looking for normal.
Well, 5 point something, so half of that, double. You said
Let me
double
just say
of
that the
normal,
worst
so
month
half of
was
that.
June, and it was nearly 20 inches in June, and it was only 5 inches in November. So November evaporation is 1/4 of normal. December evaporation was 1.93. It's very minute. It doesn't jump up until March. It starts creeping up in March, and by April we're at the halfway point, and by June we're at the peak. It's just like the sun angles. December 21st is the shortest day of the year. Evaporation is lowest.
Negligible is a fairly good word.
Negligible.
Particularly in December, January, February. Okay, let me call for the vote. The vote is to take care of the administrative function of going to level 1, which is what the ordinance requires. And so I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Didn't pass. It's 3-3.
Okay.
You guys, we're talking about something that you're required to do, that the ordinance clearly says.
Okay, let me do this. I'll make if people want to call it a fool, I'll look at this. I don't want to do this personally. I do not. However,
It's okay. I can do it if you want.
it's required. It is required by ordinance, and if I don't like the ordinance, then I need to do something to change it, so
Yeah,
therefore I will change my vote.
Okay.
Passed.
For the record, I'm still a nay.
We good?
I'm also a nay, and just to give folks out there a relief that, hey, we need to really hold on to what we have, and if we could change it later on, that's fine. I mean, but I'll stick with my nay. I want to conserve. I want to keep at the level we're at. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, but conservation is what I am preaching right now, so I'll stick with my vote. Ordinance or not?
Passed?
What?
I would venture to say yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
I can take the changed vote?
Yes.
Okay. I have a 4-2 vote then. Ms. Farmer, Mr. Hirschfeld, Mr. New, Mr. Alexander for, Mr. Silvas, Mr. Adams against. And we are now in drought stage 1. Looking for a motion for adjournment. Okay, I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Let me call for that vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.